Today's guest is Sheri McConnell. She's the Executive Director of Mary's Meals Canada. Prior to that, she's done extensive work in many faith-based NGOs, such as World Vision Canada. So with great pleasure, I would love to welcome Sheri today.
Thanks, Jermaine. It's great to be here with you.
Oh, absolutely likewise. So before we get into the main event, I have some rapid fire fun questions for you.
Oh, good.
All right, so I'll start off pretty easy. What's your favorite book of the Bible?
Favorite book of the Bible? I would probably say Luke.
Awesome. Also, there are no wrong answers, except maybe for this one. So right now, you live in Alberta. I actually used to live in Alberta. In the Battle of Alberta in the NHL, who are you going with? Flames or Oilers?
Okay, always Flames. I grew up in Calgary, so obviously with the rival. And funny enough, I was born in Edmonton, but I grew up in Calgary, so I have to say the Calgary Flames.
This is where we'll have to agree to disagree. I was born and raised part of the time in Edmonton, so this is our great divide.
Yeah, there we go, always.
What's the greatest act of Christian charity that you've ever seen?
Oh, wow, that I've ever seen. I have a dear friend who's currently living in Uganda right now, and he and his wife, young family, he actually used to work for me at World Vision. Mm-hmm. His name's Jobin and his wife Francine, and they model, I believe, what it really means to be a true disciple of Jesus. They took their young family and moved into Uganda and is working with the dying and the poorest of the poor.
Throughout your career, you've worked in faith-based NGOs. What initially drew you to this particular sector? And more importantly, what's made you want to stay?
So particularly with the faith-based NGO world, I really entered it in 2012. I was having somewhat of kind of that early 40s, hit a wall, reevaluate my calling kind of season. And I was doing a lot of things, had a lot of different experiences, and I was previously to that involved obviously in vocational ministry in a variety of capacities. But what I wanted to do is I wanted to take all of my experience and skill and stream it into one channel. And as I was praying, this opportunity for World Vision came up. And it really drew me, and it was actually for an executive director position for youth engagement across Canada. And I wasn't actually actively working in youth per se at that time. I was mentoring some young adults, but I really felt that I needed to apply for this. And I actually didn't even know if I had a chance at it, because I thought, they'll probably bring a guy in who's a youth pastor and, do all those kinds of things. But very quickly through the interview process, I made it to the top 2 candidates. And of course, obviously they offered me the job, and that was the start of my career. And so to be able to work in a faith-based charity like a World Vision, or in this case, Mary's Meals, was really inspiring for me because, and I've stayed in that world because I think they are the best at what they do when it comes to issues of addressing issues of poverty, global injustice issues. And I think that it was taking all of my passion and my calling and being able to provide a place and a platform to share that. So I haven't left, and I feel very blessed and thankful for all the different organizations I've been a part of and had leadership in and have learned from. Mm-hmm. And
During that stretch, is there a point that you kind of had an aha moment that made you know that this is the world that you want to work in, this is the world that you want to exist in?
Yeah, I went to Bible college I guess my second year out of high school, and a very small Bible college. And I remember I thought, I'm just going to go for 1 year and get a Bible, a general Bible diploma. And then I'm going to go to university and go into social work or pursue the typical kind of path of education. And after my first year of college, I came back and I knew that I was supposed to go back for a second year. I really felt God's calling me, drawing me. And I remember I walked in, it was what they call opening services of the second year of Bible college. And I was in this service, and I don't even remember who the preacher was, but he was preaching. And he said, if any of you feel called to vocational ministry, come forward. I want to pray with you. And I just knew that the Lord was telling me to go. And keep in mind, at that time, I don't want to date myself, but at that time, there weren't a lot of young single females that were doing the stuff, I call it. Like for me, when I would read the letters in red, Jesus's words, I wanted to do that. I wanted to preach. I wanted to see the sick healed. I wanted to see the miracles. I wanted to do all the stuff because it was burning inside of me. I didn't just want to take it as kind of nice poetry or prose. And so for me, it really compelled me. And right away, God really put a vocational call on my life to serve him with everything that I did. And I had worked great jobs. I worked at the bank and I did all these different things, but I knew that I wasn't meant in that moment. I wasn't meant just to work a job, come home and have a different life. I knew I was supposed to give my life for his service.
I guess in line with it being in a world where there can be bad news, can you speak to the importance of having a very positive outlook and maintaining one's faith in their life and their line of work? And can you speak to how you maintain your faith and maintain your positivity in this day and age where it's really easy to get drowned out with bad news?
Yeah, I think that initially, in my early 20s, when I kind of, said really yes to Jesus and what his plans were for my life, and not even knowing where it would take me. Right? Like I couldn't project down the road 10, 20 years down the road. But for me, it was, I know that there was scrutiny in the fact, I think people probably thought, oh, she's young, she'll get over it. She'll have a few years, she'll do her thing, and then she'll settle down, get married, have children, and live a normal, regular life, whatever that means, right? Mm-hmm. Or that I was very idealistic, or that I didn't have a desire to lay roots down and really in one place, one location. But choosing to live a vocational life in the way that I have really is a choice, and it's not easy. And there were many moments early on when I had to make some real seminal choices to do this that have held me and kept me. Would I be willing to give up the opportunity to have a family if that was the case? Or a secure career or my own home? Would I be okay with that? I think in our culture, like you talk about kind of, where the world is at, there's this crippling sense of independence. And, I see pervasive selfishness and entitlement. And so this idea of, are you willing to kind of, to lay your life down? And the upside down kingdom as a believer is that we're to surrender. And it's oftentimes, it's not just a daily thing. Sometimes it's a moment by moment, minute by minute thing, and to be willing as a Christ follower to follow him into the unknown and willing to lose everything to gain everything. And so sounds pretty, sounds nice, but it is tested. It's tested in you, but I'm reminded where the Bible talks about how obedience is better than sacrifice, and everybody's obedience to him is different according to their story. And so for me, it was, am I willing to give up the love of material possessions and things that it's easy to find security in, and truly being willing to trust him? And again, like you said, there's nothing wrong with some of those things, but who is really Lord of your life? It's easy to make idols out of things or even out of people at times. And so it's kind of that idea of that daily surrender. And so I think that that's the thing that really holds me when you talk about maintaining my faith. It's that always going back to remembering sometimes that place where God really called me. And there was an inspiring figure, and I think this is really, apropos for this conversation and for this audience, but I remember I really felt, and because I was speaking at a lot of like youth conferences in my 20s and 30s, and the Lord really spoke to me clearly about the life of Joan of Arc, and that he was calling me as a type of in the nature of the call. And I didn't really know what that meant, because I didn't even really know who Joan of Arc was at the time. And so I kind of went on this huge study about her life. like read all these books. Like even I've got tons of books back here, you know, of Joan of Arc, different versions of Joan of Arc's story. And I found it really fascinating. And again, one of the key things that really stuck out to me about her was that her purity of that single devotion, you know, to Jesus, really, to her Father. And then Francis of Assisi actually has been another character influence in my life of his story. And so when things get crazy, you know, even in the world, or messy, I just have to go back to that simple place of surrender and remembrance of who Jesus is to me and who he's called me to be in him and as his beloved.
Well, I know there's often that critique of when NGOs, faith-based NGOs or secular, do work abroad. There's a critique that people ask the question of, well, why don't you just do the work here? Why don't you, as you mentioned, like talking about neighbors, why don't you directly serve your neighbor? Can you speak to the importance of the work being done abroad, and how you've been a part of it, and how do you feel that fits in with Christ's mission for us all?
Yeah, so first of all, like I shared, change begins here. It starts with me first, and also how I choose to embrace compassion and generosity as a way of life. It's not just an action that I do, so it's something that I need to be. Sometimes it's easier to embrace generosity and compassion for a plight or a story that you hear of overseas than even in your own community. And so I say it's a way of life, and the way of life that we have of that compassion that compels us into action spills out to wherever we go. You know, because I'm passionate about and give my life to the eradication of poverty and hunger internationally, it doesn't mean that I'm not passionate about it locally. And so my local connection to my actions of what I do, my faith community that I'm part of, the way I choose to live my life, like I said, every day, is very important to the call that I do in my job, and those Canadians that I call into action. You know, in Western culture, because we're in Canada, but I could speak to, you know, we're completely blessed. We're so blessed. You know, the majority of the world does not live the way we do. It still surprises me sometimes when I have conversations with people that think, well, why, you know, help the hungry child over there when there's hungry children here? They don't have the social structures that we do. They don't have, sure, there is poverty in Canada. I've seen it. I've lived amongst it. I worked with some Aboriginal communities and lived amongst them. So I've seen the effects of poverty in Canada. And there is tangible injustice here. But what you see in the developing world is very, very different. You know, we do have systems. They're not perfect. There's lots of brokenness there. We have programs, we have opportunities to make a way, but oftentimes the places where we work, there is nothing. There isn't even many times a sustainable way of life. You know, and so sometimes that meal that we provide once a day is the only food they eat. You know, there is no other options because they don't even have the basic necessities of life. So I think it really shouldn't be comparative. It should be a fact that, you know, what would Jesus do? Jesus saw the need and he responded. You know, when he saw the poor, he addressed their physical need before oftentimes even their spiritual need. You know, and so I think that as Christ followers, I think that is our mandate to say yes. So where is that place of poverty right now? And taking even just the little amount or what you deem as even a small action and combining it to make a difference is huge. I always say, you know, we call it the little acts of kindness, the little acts of love that ripple into, you know, really like a tsunami, a sense of just, you know, great change, global change. But it's making those small choices every day.
In that you use the word alignment, and it reminded me of one time hearing something a pastor said, that we have to be in alignment for our assignment.
That's good.
Which ties in to how I actually first encountered you, which I don't know if I'd said. I was reading the Catholic Register and heard about how you ended up at Mary's Meals. Can you talk, for those who haven't read the article, can you talk a bit about how you ended up at Mary's Meals? And do you think that Providence has played a role in you fulfilling your vocations, not just at Mary's Meals, but throughout your career?
Yeah, no, it's, yeah, that's been a really interesting journey. I've had, I was in a place, I was taking a bit of a break, but I was in a place of, I was ready, I was looking, I was back in the job market, I had a few different offers. I had actually flown out to Calgary, like as I had mentioned at the front end of the conversation, I grew up in Calgary, so my family's all here. And my parents are aging, they're doing well considering, but they're in their 80s. And I was really beginning to get a strong sense that I needed to come back to Calgary. And it was funny because honestly, Jermaine, I actually didn't want to. I was living in Toronto for 5 years. I'd lived in BC. I've lived all over the place, but I really felt like God was telling me to come back. So I had an interview with this nonprofit here in Calgary in an area that I have no understanding of, completely out of the international development space. But I needed a job, and I felt like I needed to come back to Calgary. So I was really trying to discern, like, okay, God, what is this? Is this you? What should I do? Just be faithful, So I flew out here because I had to do this big fancy presentation. I was in the top 2 candidates, and great salary, ticked all the boxes. And I come out, do my presentation. I'm flying back to Toronto, and I just knew I was going to get this job. I just knew it. And I had this thing, and I didn't share it with anybody at this time, not even my family. I was flying back, and I felt this niggling in my spirit, and I felt like the Lord I thought, I'm not supposed to get out of international development. I need to stay in the areas that I'm passionate about. Otherwise, I'm just going to be doing a job and doing everything that I know I can't do. And then I really knew I still need to be in Calgary. And anyways, so I was really wrestling with this. I was praying as I was sitting on the plane, and I opened up my Facebook, and a former contemporary peer, she was actually working at World Vision in the US at the same time I was working at World Vision Canada, and we were kind of carrying a couple similar portfolios, and we've been connected and become friends. But I had talked to her for 6 years, probably 6-7 years. And she just says, hey, Sheri, I haven't talked to you forever. Just thought I'd reach out. You've been on my heart, it's on my mind, and thought I'd connect with you and see what you're up to. I don't work for World Vision anymore. I work for this organization called Mary's Meals. And, she's the executive director for the US office. And we're looking to expand. And we're going to be looking for an executive director for Canada. And I think he would be perfect. And I didn't know anything about Mary's Meals. Like, I hadn't even heard of them, right? So all of a sudden, I had this thing inside of me. As soon as I read this, I just knew. It was the weirdest thing. And so I then went on this big hunt, and I read our CEO and founder's book, Magnus's book, The Shed That Fed a Million Children. And I devoured that book, and I went on research, and I started doing my homework, and the posting wasn't even posted yet. And but that was what started the process, and it literally was providential. And it was so funny, Jermaine, to finish the story, was that 2 weeks, before I started the interview process, it was shortly after Christmas this last year, and I had 3 other top, I won't say names, but I had 3 other top nonprofits that were kind of headhunting me, and they were good, and I really had to wrestle. I had to really think through, and it wasn't about taking the best salary. It wasn't about taking, the bigger opportunity. It was about obedience again. And so Providence, I'd say God's direction. It's like Proverbs 5:6, right? Trust the Lord with all your heart, lean not on your own understanding, acknowledge him, and he will direct your path. And I've seen that every time in my life, every time. Sometimes it feels like it's last minute, but like God, I wish I would have known that a year ago, but every time he's come through.
It sounds like you do a lot of reflecting, a lot of discernment. Have you thought of what you hope your lasting impact to be?
Yeah, I think it's really, at the end of the day, and I don't mean this as a, because many people probably say this, but it's really about waiting to hear that well done, good and faithful servant. That's what I want to hear at the end of my day. I've never been motivated by climbing the corporate ladder. I've never been motivated by money, obviously. I've never been motivated by some big fancy title. It's always been, how can I serve, And I think if I can look back and see roads and platforms and containers and opportunities that I've created by my pioneering and my building, for the emerging generations that could then take it even further than what I could even do, with probably even greater gifts than even I have, then I know I've done the right thing as a leader, and I've seen that at different moments when the Lord's moved me on, and I've looked back and I still stay in contact, with some of those leaders or some of those young people or some of those different people I've invested into, and I see what they're doing. And I think sometimes I have to remind myself that, even though I don't have biological children, I have a lot of children that I've invested into over the years. And that warms my heart to know that they could go further than even me if I've done my part.
Obviously, you're at Mary's Meals. Clearly, you're quite happy, and you've just recently started. But with that, I'm still curious to know, what do you think the next phase of your vocational journey will be?
I am really excited to have a base where I can pioneer, meaning break new ground, and I can build strong foundations for exponential growth. Mary's Meals is really just an incredible organization. It's a grassroots organization. Its goal is it's all focused about feeding more children in a place of education. It's taking all of my years of kind of like vocational ministry, grassroots, combining with all the skills and the valuable lessons I've learned through many large nonprofits, and combining it together. And it's exciting to come into Mary's Meals Canada at this juncture, because we're tiny, but I know that God's called me to pioneer and to build and to create the infrastructure and to rally even more Canadians to support our mission and our cause, because we need everyday people to create change in this world. It's not about how big our staff team is. It's about how we can unlock and discover together with Canadians what drives them and moves them to compassion, and how we can work together to change lives. And so that's what I'm excited about. I am super excited for more of Canada to hear about what we do as Mary's Meals, because there's a lot of people that I think, and even in the short time I've been here, it's been incredible. Like, even through the film, kind of going back to the film, just the doors that it's opened, and having said that, Gerard Butler, it's interesting because people go, oh, Gerard Butler, actor. And yeah, he's an incredible actor, but there's an authentic, genuine friendship that Magnus has with Gerard. And that's the cool thing. That's a beautiful thing. It's a completely different story. It's a story probably better told by Magnus, but it's just the fact that, again, it's that authenticity. It's that sense of real relationship, and through partnership and partnering together, we can do great things together.
So with all of that said, Sheri, what wisdom can you offer people trying to identify and cultivate their particular vocational gift?
I'd say, first of all, listen to that still small voice, which means you have to quiet yourself and put yourself in a place where you can get rid of the distractions of life, which is hard. Be true to who you are. Never compromise your values. These are things that I've learned and continually, learn. And don't be held hostage by people's opinions. I have a little sticky note on my desk here, and it says, don't be held hostage by people's opinions. You are a visionary, and you live in a realm where most people don't. And I have that, in front of me because sometimes I need to be reminded of that. You know, when you have those days or seasons of question, which we all do, you know, or discouragement, you know, go back to that place where you remember your calling. You know, write it down if you have to, where you remember where that still small voice spoke to you. It might be one word, it might be an impression, it might be something that, you know, an experience, an encounter that you had. It was like in my an interview I did with the Catholic Register, I talked about how my first experience of real poverty was in Juarez, Mexico. That moved me, and I believe God used that. I know He did move me significantly into the vocation that I am in now. I'll always remember that. And you know, so write it down in your heart, but also write it down. And I love, you know, it's the famous Theodore Roosevelt quote, right? That Brene Brown has made so, you know, famous. It's always about, and I'm just going to read this because I think it's just so inspiring, and you can never not hear this enough. When you're choosing to give your life to God and to His calling over your life, is this: it is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man, or I'll add the woman, who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming, but who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who is at best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. And I just think that encapsulates it all.
That is, I'm going to mark that one down. That's a fantastic quote, and a strong reminder to be a doer when it comes to the good work that needs to be done.
Yes.
Sheri, I want to thank you so much for your time, and I really appreciate you pouring into In All Things and pouring into Vocation. And I really think that you've given our viewers a lot to think about and a lot for their own discernment. So thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Jermaine. I really appreciate your time. Thanks for this platform to share hearts and experiences.
You're welcome.